Good evening. Good evening. You might have sometime or other, or many times, had the experience where you answer the phone, and at the end of the line, at the other end of the line, is an old friend that you haven't spoken with in a very long time. You might say, "Oh, I was just thinking of you." And you find yourself perhaps schmoozing as though you just picked up where you last left off, isn't it? And we sometimes say of that kind of experience that the connection felt timeless. We use the word timeless. Now, why do we use the word timeless? Because we're so drenched in presence with that person, right? We're so present. We're not in time. We're so happy to be in present awareness and presence in a shared experience that everything about everything else falls away. The future, the past, or just ideas that might pop up in conversation, but the experience you're having is so strong that we say it's timeless. Now, is it possible to pretty much live that way in a sense of timelessness? We use the concept of time, of course. We came here at 7:30. We use the concept of time, but really, truthfully, we are living in timelessness. Time is a construct. We made it up. And when you understand that really you're just flowing in a very big now, that's all that's ever happening, then there's a richness to the experience. One of my favorite quotes, many of you who've been with me a long time have heard this many times, from Nisargadatta: "It is reality that makes this present moment so vital, so different from past and future, which are merely mental." All of the mental stories, past and future, don't have quite the vitality of this moment, do they? Of this now, of this presence that you're experiencing. And so we have this option to just adjust our attention just ever so slightly, really. You can just use your facility of moving your attention around and let yourself notice, and that's really all that it is. You don't have to create it or do anything to get there. Just let yourself notice that you are experiencing, you're flowing in this now, in this timelessness. I like to say it's a taste of eternity, but actually for a short time, because we have these little blink of life. So it's like you're tasting eternity for a little while. And as the attention begins to enjoy that experience, which it does, it calls it back. It's a haunting. It keeps calling it back to that experience, to that taste that just flows along. You know, you come to a certain age in life, as I have, and as some people in the room have, where there's presumably quite a lot more behind than there is ahead. So there's a different relationship to the thoughts of past and future, inevitably. But what one can come to know and come to really appreciate is that you can experience this sense of a kind of elongation of time, if you will, when you're very, very much with your actual direct experience. So you can feel it in this room right now, even if you're not following all the words. You can feel it in this room. There's a vitality. There's a wakefulness. Different from past and future, which are merely mental. Okay, that's all that's coming to me to say. If anyone has any questions or anything you'd like to discuss on such matters, please feel free.
You quoted Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Yes.
And knowing that he comes from a Hindu tradition, I was wondering how you see that as relating to this being a Buddhist school and kind of the connection there between what he says and Buddhism.
Well, first of all, even though he was in a kind of Hindu setting, let's say, I don't find his teachings especially Hindu. I find them quite universal. And what I love about the Buddhist teachings, especially the most simple of the Buddhist teachings, is that they are also universal. So truth, which is a tricky subject, by the way, but it is something that one can make an experiment with no matter what the label. And eventually, in a way, the labels fall away, right? And you're having a very direct experience of the so-called truth. And what's great about, say, the scientific method is that you make that experiment in different contexts and it remains consistently so, right? So what Nisargadatta pointed to over and over again in his teachings, and what many of the great teachers point to in every tradition, is this very simple truth that you can experience this very moment, right? That there's an awareness that's radiant in you and as you, that you can tune your awareness to that channel in a sense. You can dial in that frequency. It's different than most of the rest of what people are dialing in, right? It's really different. Look at the world. I mean, it's madness reigning. So this is a different specific channel that you can tune into. It happens to be the channel that a lot of the most, extraordinary awakened minds that have ever walked this earth tuned into and spoke about, either in their own tradition, their own culture, their own time, right? Jesus saying, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Ramakrishna saying, we search, the musk deer searches the world over for the source of its own scent. In Zen Buddhism, they say, the earth where you stand is the pure lotus land, and this very body, the body of Buddha. They're all pointing, as you can hear, and there's many, many, many others, they all point to an essential truth that it can only actually be true for you if you taste it. Not if you think, oh, that sounds right. Yeah, that sort of sounds right. I like that. But taste it. And then it's really true. It really pops. And then you realize you start to develop an ear for truth when you hear it. It starts to resonate with your own direct experience. It serves as a tuning fork. You know, you start just pinging together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Are you familiar with Theosophy?
Yes.
Would you consider that then to be Theosophy in a sense?
Well, of course, the best of it. You know, the parts that are direct pointers, right? But as Krishnamurti famously said when he left Theosophy, truth is a pathless land, right? He was their big master and walked away from it. You know that. And when he walked away from it, what he said was, truth is a pathless land. So to be, let all of these wonderful traditions be fingers pointing to the moon, right? But really the point is to experience the moon. Tonight the moon is quite lovely here in the Los Angeles sky, right? You taste it. And then you can let anything be the reminder. There's reminders scattered all through great literature, for instance, right? And great drama, great movies, great conversations you might have with just any friend. You know, you begin to be very susceptible, I like to say grace prone to hearing that which resonates in the deep places, in the places that remind you, right? I was talking to one of my girlfriends today on the phone, and she was telling me about a friend of hers who I had known from my friend, had been dealing with cancer for 5 years. But she's at the end of this journey with cancer. She's going to be leaving this world soon. But she was telling my friend, our mutual friend, that she'd gone to Target the other day. She had found this really great coat. She's in New England. She found this really, really perfect coat. And she was telling our friend how delighted she was just shopping at Target and finding this coat. And she said that she got home and she thought, how ironic that, you know, that something so simple in a way was so much fun for her, that she was really letting herself have the fun of this little mini shopping excursion. And how poignant it was that for most of her life, that wouldn't have been the case. That wouldn't have been much of a big fun thing. She would have been thinking there was way bigger fun things to be had, and that this one really was, you know, kind of had a great flair for her. And as I'm listening to this story, you know, I was letting that into my heart today. I was actually drinking a cup of coffee as I was hearing this, talking to my friend, and I was gazing out this window at this spectacular view where I'm staying at Rick's house. And in that moment, I was having one of those flares of like, one of those timeless flares, right? where you just realize, show up for this. It's a short run. Might as well show up and not be battered about by stories of what happened, what might happen, what are they thinking of me, how am I doing, am I fulfilling my potential, all these tormenting things we go through, and then boom, it's over, right?
Thank you.
First of all, I want to say it's great to have you back with us for the next 6 weeks. Like an amazing amount of time. I'm pretty excited, and I'm sure a lot of other people are. And it's good to be with you.
It's good to see you. It's been a long time. Yeah. One of those timeless moments now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to, it's really beautiful what you're talking about. My experience is, occasionally to be able to have that experience. But what I find most of the time is my mind erupts in all kinds of stuff. It can be analyzing or going, is this what she's talking about? How do I get back there? Is this real, for real? Yeah, and then it could be thousands of thoughts that come up, all kinds of different stuff. So what do we do with that?
Let it go. It goes. It doesn't stick. None of the thoughts ever stick.
I've been
hearing that for
many
years.
30 years.
I know.
And I must be a failure.
No. First of all, let's look at that. Have your thoughts been sticking?
Let's put it this way. They stick less than they used to.
They don't stick at all.
Well,
really, no, let's look at it, because
okay.
That's a really important thing to understand and notice. None of your thoughts stick. They don't stick. They go by. Maybe a similar thought comes along. Maybe a cluster of thoughts come along due to a certain subject being interesting to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, each and every thought is just gone in an instant. It's just in a little electrical brain impulse, right? So all of the thoughts are gone. Every one that you've ever had. None of them stuck. So what are they coming and going in?
Well, it's nothing.
Yeah. So there's an awareness, right? There's an awareness. And the thoughts arise in that awareness and they pass.
Right. I guess what I find is like there's almost like as one diminishes, there's almost like a residue or some kind of, somebody called it psychological gravity, that pulls me into that next thought, and then that, and the next, and the next. So I understand on an intellectual basis that they don't stick.
Correct.
But the feeling is that they are really, I wouldn't say permanent, but a force that draws me away from this presence.
Yeah, and you are pointing to something that's quite true, which is that thoughts do have neurochemicals associated with them, and the neurochemistry can then kind of cause more similar thoughts to arise. That's true. That's why it is very important to interrupt them, especially if they're negative and if they're pointlessly dragging you down, to interrupt them as best you can, in any way you can. Anything is fair game, right? It doesn't have to be something spiritual. Just interrupt it any old way you can. And remind yourself as needed, have a little intention, right, to notice the non-sticking nature of these thoughts and how arbitrary they are, right? They're conditioned. They're usually about something that's irrelevant, often. Hardly any of them that are useful. comparatively, right, in a day, out of all the thoughts. I mean, we're such thinking animals. You know, it was our big advantage for a long time, but now it's not. You know, now it's not. And it takes some intention, and you have that intention. That has been your passion for all these many, many, many years. What you're saying to me is that it's not completely consistent. It's not as perfect as I would like. But that's okay. It doesn't have to be. We're not trying for any big, you know, steady state. We don't need that. Just the tastes that you get, however many, be grateful. And I have said for many, many years, the only trick is to really notice that you love that taste. And I think you do love that taste.
Right, which you know, it kind of feels almost like masochistic, like, you know, to love it so much, but to be so easily drawn away from it. It's kind of like, I guess, it's the universal story of every film and book that's ever been that, you know, or women who like bad boys and like they like the good guy. You know, it's like there's this. It seems like almost like perverse to go back when you can see what's available.
Well, don't beat yourself up for that, because the conditioning is powerful. As we all know, the conditioning is strong. You know the Sufi's poet, I forgot her name. Anyway, it's something like, even though you have broken your vow 10,000 times, come again, right? Mm-hmm. So you just come back as soon as you notice. Don't worry, don't bother with the fact that it happens a lot. Trust that you still love this taste, that you yearn for it, that you're haunted, right? That when you're off in the crazy neurosis, there's a Dharma bell ringing in you saying, I'm so sick of this, right? And then come again, you know? Right. Don't keep accounts, don't bother, right?
Right. I think when you say trust, that's a really becoming more important for me to be able to deal, you know, to look at this stuff that's going on.
And confidence comes with making the experiment over and over again. You know, sometimes I get knocked off my feet by some piece of information, some loss, you know. I don't know if you heard the podcast I did, but you know, a month ago, my great love of my life from long ago, big dramatic story, quarter of a century ago, but he died suddenly in a kayaking accident. I just got the news about it, and you know, the day it happened, I heard. And, you know, these kinds of shocks, these are body blows to the system, you know, and I was taken aback by the emotions, the memories, the remorse, the if onlys, the blah, you know. And yet I had this weird confidence that knew this too shall pass. I will wait it out. I'll let the emotions roll, let the grief arise, let it come through, let it be strong like a thunderstorm, you know, because I knew that the quiet was waiting, you know. In fact, it was there throughout it, but it was waiting to predominate, and it now has. Mm-hmm. It's been about a month. It's now in a field of acceptance, of quiet, and of gratitude for what I shared with him while he was alive, and for this gift in his death. So this point about confidence, about trust. But I like to say the trust is really born from experience. You know, you make the experiment over and over again. You keep coming up with the same result. And then there's confidence. So So you've been making this experiment a long time. And there, of all the things to do tonight in Los Angeles, you came here because something in you pulls you to this very strongly, right? Mm-hmm. I would just say to you, just relax and rely on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds, it's deja vu all over again.
Yes. I'm not saying anything new. Oh, for you,
that's good.
Yeah.
It'd be a little tough to phrase this question, but how do you approach balancing that taste of sustaining the now with actual plans that you have, like something coming up, future stuff that's real?
Yeah, sure.
Because in the last 6 months or so, I've been feeling that now more.
Yeah.
I give some of that to Eckhart Tolle, who I've read both his books. But then there's also real things that are coming up. So
Sure.
living in that, I won't call it bliss, but that feeling, satori, that feeling that's happening, but having plans come up. How do you approach that balance, Catherine?
I also have to make a lot of plans. I spend the days planning, it seems, So there's an actual way to experience making plans, which is that you're making the plans in the now, and that's how you're experiencing the actual making of the plans. Some of them come to be and some of them don't. You're sort of just throwing it out there, but you're really, when you're calling the airline, it's pretty clear you're not actually on the plane yet. You're in the now calling the airline. So it's a little bit of a confusion sometimes people have with regard to so-called living in the now, and with an idea that they can't ever think about so-called future. That's a kind of a no-no. And I'm not suggesting that at all. There are very good reasons to be conceptualizing about the future. It's just that it doesn't have the visceral experience of the now. We use it as a tool, to get around. We need to have some intentionality before there's action, usually. So that's all totally fine, right? You can feel it, though, as I said, and in the quote from Nisargadatta, you can feel how different it is in the experience of being really drenched in the presence that you're actually living, or thinking about an idea of something that is going to happen in the future, or something that did happen in the past that you experience now in memory. And memory is very suspect. We edit along the way, right? Isn't it amazing how sometimes you find out something that you thought you remembered so accurately, and it turns out that you misremembered it, and there's really good evidence that shows you misremembered it, right? So you begin to really be suspicious of how you remember things. And again, that is all more like dreamlike. Our memories are dreamlike, our future pictures are a bit dreamlike, but this, right? This, not very dreamlike.
If I can add to that. I guess another thing is I have pretty big goals I want to achieve.
Yeah.
And partly the goal is, when I achieve that, whether it's a position I want to accomplish or a new job, I'm not too naive to say, then I'll be happy. It's not like that. But when I'm in that now and that feeling, I don't really feel like I care so much about that goal, because right now it feels so great. But how do you still want to go towards that goal, which is important, which I dedicate a lot of my free time to achieving? That balance there kind of gets to me.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
I always feel that, falling in love with the Dharma should come with a disclaimer, which is that it's going to ruin your life in certain ways. And I only mean that in the context of sometimes it does reorient you. Let's say to another way of being in your life, another career path. It may, or it may not, but it is not necessarily in conflict with your goals. It is not in conflict with creativity, but it may be in conflict with a kind of burning ambition. An ambition that wants to prove something, that wants to be somebody, that wants to beat out the others, that wants to show off. All that kind of material does start to fade in the power of now. It does start to fade. And in the immersion in this, there's also a tenderness that arises. A great tenderness starts to arise in your being, such that you're much more interested in things, in feelings of empathy rather than winning. Or you're much more interested in truly being present with someone rather than rushing off to your goal. These are the ways that it impedes on the, like I say, the white-hot ambition. And then the movement in you starts to come from a different place. The creativity that you want to express becomes more like you want to give away a gift. You want to give something away. It's not that you're out to get, it's that you're giving it all away. And that becomes the drive, if you will, if there is a drive. And I've seen it over and over again. I've seen it in so many people that even the woman I was talking to today, my close friend, she said it today, as a matter of fact, that there was a way that her conditioning was such that it was, her father had a kind of story with her that no matter what she did, it wasn't enough. She got a book on the New York Times bestseller list 25 years ago, and then again recently, but at the other one, her dad was still alive. And he said something to her like, well, it only stayed on for a week. Like, how many people have a New York Times bestseller for even a day, But I mean, so that was her conditioning. It was never good enough. And she was whipping herself even after her dad died, But that has all quieted. That is completely quieted, And now the movement for her is coming from a very different place. It's coming from wanting to simply express an authentic self and to just make an offering.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful to see you, Catherine, and it feels like you've never left.
I know. It feels that way to me too.
So I've been dealing with a lot of loss this past month. Very close friend died. Another very close friend died. An icon died who I'd met a few times, but so I jump in with everyone else. It's just like I'd rather spend my days just looking at memories. And you alluded to that with your dear friend. But it's also, there's and I know it's not really for me right now. It's not grief. It's just, it's like, what is it all about? What is it? When I looked at my friend's obit, she was pretty well known. It's like it was just the accomplishments and none of what's real behind it. It's just so interesting. It was just the list. Mm-hmm. And when I'd last saw her, she said, I've lost all interest in doing any of that. Just lost all interest. It's like another person emerged.
Yeah.
Someone I was very lucky to be with. So I guess it's this big question. It's life and death. And death is going to take all of us. So I feel the same way. I want to accomplish something, not just go quietly into the night. So it's just, I don't know, it's a strange space I'm being in because of just, I feel like everyone's going over the waterfall so fast.
Yeah.
You know, there's no time.
That's why it's good to just live in timelessness, you know. My teacher Punjaji said, death is when the next breath doesn't come. Till then we're breathing, right? And we're here. And there's all this coming and going. And at a certain age, there's a lot of going, you know. That's happening a lot for me as well. I don't get through a week without hearing of someone. And it's forced my awareness to tune to, well, what's here, right? It does force your awareness into, okay, you know, the little bud, the orchid we bought at Trader Joe's the other night, you know. Just looking at the blooming that continues amidst the dying, right? To not get too toppled off into gloom and grief, but to kind of counterbalance it with awareness, not making anything up artificially, but really counter it with the noticing of the blossoming and of the beauty and of the tender mercies that still go on, you know. I think a lot of us are beleaguered. A lot of people are beleaguered by what's going on in the world. There feels to me a quickening of unraveling, like it's just coming apart at the seams, you know. And if you just watch the news a while, that's going to be the feeling you have, right? That's going to definitely be that's the transmission. So it's also very important as a counterbalance, just to stay sane, to notice in your own life and in the lives of people you know, all the little sweetnesses that go on, all the kindnesses, the generosity, right? The ways that people love each other, people help each other. You just have to kind of make sure your awareness is, if it's falling off onto one side, you know, it's like Ajahn Chah, the famous quote. A student said to him, you know, you told this person to do this particular thing, but last week you told someone to do the opposite. And he said, if you see someone walking down a path and they're falling off to the left, you shout, go right. And if they're falling off to the right, you shout, go left, right? You're just balancing it. And in our own case, we have to do that. We have to balance. We have to know when we're being just dragged down by information. It doesn't, you know, I'm not even saying dragged down by your imagination. I'm saying dragged down by actually, you know, the real news, the information that we're getting anyway. I have to balance that too. I tend to be a news junkie. And there are times when I know I have to unplug from this. It's starting to feel toxic. And then I just look around, you know, or I reflect on the many, many, many experiences as a beneficiary of kindness and generosity in my life, you know. It doesn't take long to snap out of it. It also, each of these losses is a kind of, it sort of supercharges one's love for those who are left, right? The incredible appreciation for those who are still walking along with us in this timelessness.
When I know I'm coming to see you, or just having experiences in life, I go, I gotta ask Catherine about this. Like I'll get angry or upset or be swept away by my thoughts, and I gotta ask Catherine what to do about this. And then I get here, and then I'm just here, and I go, well, maybe I'll worry about my anger another time. I just want to be here.
Plus, I always say the same thing, so that exercise, I've got to ask Catherine. It can be very, very short, because you know what I'm going to say.
No, but somehow every time you say it, it seems fresh. So say it again.
What's the specific question?
I keep getting swept away by anger and disappointment and bitterness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of cause, isn't there? There's you can really find reason to be disappointed.
Well, my brain can. My circumstances are, quite blessed.
Yeah, well, that's good to recognize. That's very good to recognize.
Oh, good.
Of course, yes. Yeah, I mean, I always say you can make a hell of heaven and a heaven of hell with your interpretation.
My thoughts, that ticky tape.
And with the expectation that people are going to behave in reasonable ways, fair ways and kindly and so on in general in the world. It's a prescription for torment. Now, probably you can be grateful for the fact that most of the people you hang out with are gentle creatures,
Yes, that's true.
How lucky is that?
Yes.
Yes. Very lucky. And as you've heard me say, no doubt, the deeper you go in this, the deeper your own quiet, the more nuanced your own sensitivity, the thinner the crowd around you in terms of who's hanging out on that level. It just is how it is. Reasonably so, rationally so. You begin to realize you're the one who has to offer understanding without expecting to be understood. You might be in the position of being more generous in general than you are experiencing back, possibly. You may find yourself turning the other cheek, overlooking the crazy behavior, on and on, listening to the stupid opinions, on and on. That may be the case. And as you get quieter and as your taste is more and more and more subtle, that becomes ever more so. And then you are again supercharged in gratitude to those with whom you can speak and who do understand you and who do get the beauty of your trip, and who do understand what you've suffered and the distance you've come and all of that becomes very, very, very precious. But it's nothing to expect from the general hordes. And I'm sorry to say, it's just that way. It's probably always been the case. It's a weird, crazy spectrum, this human experience. They're like the Christ-like creatures living at one end of the spectrum. And then there is just pure depravity, cruelty that is not seen in any other species but ours, and the whole thing in between. And so that is just what it is being here. That's the human experience. It's a huge range, and you can kind of feel it in yourself, even though you hang out on one end of the spectrum luckily, right? And we who have come to this room, I dare say, are mostly hanging out on that end of the spectrum. I know you're not all, saints in here, and I'm certainly not, but that we at least have an intention for goodness, that we have an intention for quiet, that we have an intention to be aware and awake, right? Puts us in a different category than almost everyone on the planet. Look at what people are into. So here you are, one of my friends long ago used the analogy, it's like being an orchid in a field of boulders that are rolling down the hill, and you're this delicate orchid. You're made of the same stuff. Actually, we're all made of the same stuff. But some of the stuff is rougher. It's just rougher, and it's dangerous. Another thing to reflect on is that luckily you're attracted to, not just as a way of being yourself, but you're attracted to those who live in the gentler realms. All right. So that's the best you can really hope for. And just with that kind of understanding, often you can, it's like Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do. That's basically the mode that gets you through a lot of this. You're looking at ignorance. That prevails. And we live in a culture that exalts ignorance and greed and even hatred. All the Buddhist, as Rick and I were talking, it was the trifecta of madness, we live in a culture that celebrates a lot of that. So that is being drip-fed to us. And you can feel that you're really out of step often with the culture, You can feel a real aloneness in that. But you're not alone. There are beings, not in the great percentages, but enough, as we can see, just who do hear this clarion call and who have heard it through the ages. I always like to point out the people we venerate throughout history are the ones who are saying exactly this. Those are the ones who we venerate, and those are the ones we remembered. So you're in good company.
Today I've been present all day long. I have an inkling of what I wanted to do for the day, and rather than, as you said earlier, rather than get all fervent and fired up about, or ambitious, that was your word, about where I want to go, I just enjoyed the trip, one step at a time.
Yes, very good. I would recommend just live the life like that. Just enjoy the trip, one step at a time, really. So often we're missing a joy, like my friend's friend who went to Target and had a great old time. We're missing the simple little joys because we're thinking there's a bigger one to come. There's a bigger one out there, that this one isn't quite enough. It's okay, but there's something else, somewhere else, that's going to be a lot better. And it's so, ironic, poignant, and mysterious, really, that, I'm sure many of us have had this experience. You look at something a person that you were with at a certain time in your life, or a journey you took, and you realize how fantastic that was in hindsight, but that you might have not really realized how amazing that was when you were really living it, Mm-hmm. It's often the case. And so to really start to let yourself have let this moment be it, There's a fantastic Zen New Yorker cartoon, a Zen master and a student. And the caption is, the Zen master is speaking to the student, and he's saying, nothing happens next. This is it, right? He's obviously been asked, what happens next? Nothing happens next. This is it. This is it.
So I was raised in a Zen Buddhist family, and then went to Vipassana for like 10 years, and now I've sort of discarded all traditions, and I claim to be an atheist. So my question to you is, I do believe that the concrete self is sort of an illusion. In other words, perhaps I believe that I could be looking at myself right now when I look at you, okay? So my question is, I recently have sort of become fascinated by consciousness in the way that I'm trying to ascertain at what point I choose, moment by moment, any of my intentions. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is sort of in your own study of your own consciousness, where is choice occurring, if that makes any sense?
You're pointing to the whole discussion about free will, isn't it?
Well, in essence, yeah. I'm sort of wondering in your experience what you've found.
I'll tell you, in my experience, I always say, if choice arises, choose freedom, right? We have the appearance of being able to move our attention around. Now, whether or not this is all completely conditioned, who knows? But there's the appearance of it, right? If I asked you to, please go sit on this cushion, and if you were willing to do it, you could do it, right? Through a whole process of your intention and your movement, and then suddenly you're there. So I would just say, keep this very simple. If choice is arising, don't worry about whether it's conditioned or not. A lot is conditioned that we can't control at all. That we can grant. That there is biological conditioning, there is cultural conditioning, there is genetic and familial and age conditioning, every kind of conditioning, right? But we do have this little bit of wiggle room, I like to say it's like a little rudder on a gigantic ship, a tiny little rudder that we can move around. And yet that little tiny rudder can actually change the course of the ship. With that little tiny rudder of your attention, and you're moving your attention around. So use it. Some people may not have that option. There are people who are extremely mentally ill, who don't seem to have any ability to direct their own attention. But if you do seem to have the ability, then use it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, David.
Along the same lines, I wanted to try out a proposal and see if you had an opinion about it. Regarding attention. And over the years, I've kind of noticed in the most general way that whatever it is that you pay attention to, however that seems to come about, which is fairly mysterious, that does seem to cause flourishing in in sort of a very general way. And what you ignore, or what one ignores, it kind of has a general tendency to wither. And at any rate, that's a simple idea that seems like it has some value to it to me. And I was just wondering if that seemed similar. And you know, when it comes to the free will question, the great philosophical conundrum, it's like, well, it just occurred to me, even if there were an answer, or you could know the answer, of what benefit would that be? And maybe that's just restating the question in another way. I don't know. But
I completely agree about
the flourishing
that.
and the withering. That's something that's, and that's. I don't ever remember reading that anywhere.
No, but you've probably heard it's kind of a famous spiritual yarn about how the story about the young Indian boy saying to his grandfather, "Grandfather, there are two wolves who live inside of me. One is very kind and docile and compassionate. Yes. And the other one is vicious and hateful and uncontrollable and mad. And they're at war inside of me. You know, which one will win?" And the grandfather says, "The one that you feed."
Right. That's quite wonderful, isn't it?
That's it. The same thing. Yeah. Right. And one of my girlfriends the other day said, she was telling me about just healthy habits. She's sort of trying to do more healthy habits in her life. And she had read something somewhere where they said, you know, don't go into deprivation. Like say, you know, you can't have, you know, ice cream and you can't have this and that, but just increase the good stuff. You know, like just drink more green juice and eat more vegetables, you know, like just replace it. And I love that perspective. And I completely agree with it in terms of what we've been talking about here tonight. Let your attention float more in joy, in simple awareness, simple joys, by the way, which feed us. It's like feeding the wolf, the good wolf, you know. Reflections that gladden your heart, right? Instead of depress you. Reflections that gladden your heart. Things that lift you. Just add more of that. Sprinkle it into your life. Be liberal with it. Be generous with yourself, right? And it kind of dampens down. The rest of it starts to wither on the vine. And like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be totally all the time. You can keep a little neurosis around, a little suffering, a little grumbling, a little whining if you want, but increase the beauty and the joy and the kindness and the connection. You know, the connection is so important. You know, the feeling of being connected to the ones you love in your life. Let yourself have that and stay connected with them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.